All right, let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins. The second he comes back, all of a sudden the Cardinals offense looks back to what it was last year. Listen, I know a lot of people are going to sit here and say, and we're going to get into it. I'm going to start off with the play you see on the screen, but I know a lot of people are going to say, isn't it an issue that your offense is so dependent on one player? Well, maybe, but not when that player is DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best wide receivers in football. It's not the worst thing in the world to be dependent on that guy. Obviously, you'd love for an offense that's not dependent on anybody, but if it has to be dependent on somebody, I can understand making it dependent on number 10 for Arizona. Probably worth more than a second round pick. Shout out Bill O'Brien. Let's talk about this play. It's going to be a zone coverage play. You have a different receiver that's not Hopkins running a clear out route. You don't have Hopkins running the out route. So hopefully the corner will be pushed further deep. Potentially, someone covering the middle of the field can pick up Hopkins, but now you're creating a mismatch. Watch how when this play begins, you see that that's pretty much what happens. So the Saints are actually playing this relatively well, but it's just like you can't be expecting someone who isn't a outside corner to be able to cover Hopkins consistently. That's a tough situation. I mean, listen, that's Justin Evans, who a safety who came back from a really tough injury, which is kind of a cool story by him. I remember he's a former Tampa Bay Buccaneer who felt like he could have done a lot of good things, had some tough injuries, but it's just like that's just not a situation that is fair for Justin Evans to be in. A guy who really should be a backup safety at this point in his career going up against Hopkins. Like, this is kind of the difficulty. Kyler sees this, he hits Hopkins, who is wide open, and you pick up a big gain. But this is just how one player can completely change the dynamic of a situation. Because, okay, well, that was tough. You don't want to be able to give up those types of plays. But the issue is, well, then what? Then are you forced to be in a situation where you can't play cover 3 zone? Well, I mean, kind of, yeah. It's kind of like you just can't run that type of concept because you can't put yourself in a situation where an elite receiver is going up against your backup safety. So what does New Orleans do? Well, they can try stuff like this, which is it's 2 safety deep coverage. I believe this is man. I could be wrong about it. It looked it's played very weird. But what you are going to see is that the corner who is covering Hopkins on this play, it's Chris Harris Jr., who, a couple of interesting things with Harris. One thing, just seeing him in a Saints uniform just doesn't compute in my brain. Also, seeing a cornerback wear number 19 doesn't make sense to me. Like, 19 should be a receiver, so a couple of things that just don't work for my brain. But what you're going to see here is just how far off he plays on Hopkins. I mean, watch how when Kyler takes the snap, you see the Saints are determined to not let Hopkins beat them deep to the point where even well down the field, and again, first down marker at the 38-yard line, but even when Hopkins is at the 37-yard line, there's still about 4 or 5 yards of cushion in this situation. Hopkins makes the catch. Kyler makes the throw. Hopkins makes the catch, picks up the first down. Really good play by him. And, listen, maybe it's just Harris Jr. at this point in his career is someone who, can't get beat deep down the field. Maybe that has something to do with it. But I definitely think part of it is, guys are afraid of getting beat deep by Hopkins, and it's kind of understandable, but it puts you in tough situations. Like, this one's going to be another example of, I don't even have to break down the whole play. Just look at how far off the corner who is lined up on Hopkins is. This is the respect that he brings. And listen, sometimes it's the concept itself that's also having guys play off. Of course, that's the case, but even in those concepts, you see guys play even more off against someone like Hopkins. I mean, watch as Kyler is going to run a play action, hits Hopkins immediately, and that's a free, decent amount of yards right off the bat, just because of how far off players are playing off of Hopkins because of the respect that he brings. So yeah, he forces you into certain defenses, and he forces you to respect his, deep game enough that you give up free completions. So what do you have to do? Well, what if you just play him straight up? Like, watch, something like this is a good example of, a way that you can try to play him straight up. So that's what they're going to do here. Just a one-on-one matchup. They're kind of saying, hey, single safety deep here. We need someone who can beat Hopkins, who can consistently win against Hopkins. They're using the rookie here, Alontae Taylor, who, tough task for poor Taylor here, having him go one-on-one in this situation, but that's what they're doing. Look at how when Kyler, fakes a pitch and then looks over there, you see that there's not separation, but Hopkins has never needed separation. Hopkins is one of the best jump ball receivers in football. He might be the best jump ball receiver in football still. I feel like people have forgotten about him a little bit these past couple of years, But, you see that Taylor has his back completely turned because, again, you have to respect Hopkins. But in this situation, Hopkins can play the ball, Taylor cannot. And watch how when Kyler throws one up, watch, really good stuff by Kyler. Haven't given him much credit in this video, but throwing to the back shoulder where Hopkins could adjust a little bit better was a smart play by him. And then Hopkins, of course, can't adjust so well. So you have to give Kyler some credit as well. Again, people will say, oh, well, he just is successful because he throws to Hopkins, but he also knows how to work with Hopkins. We've seen it happen before where, Baker Mayfield can't figure out how to work with Odell, despite the fact that Odell is clearly very talented. Well, Kyler is someone who he knows how to throw to a super talented receiver, and there certainly is some value in someone who can do that. Now let's go over to this play. So this is another example of, first off, good example of, hey, put him in a position to succeed. You're seeing Cliff Kingsbury do this. Cliff Kingsbury works really well with Hopkins as well. I mean, it really does kind of feel like once Hopkins is back, it's like, oh yeah, remember when Cliff Kingsbury was the favorite to win Coach of the Year halfway through last season? Because he knows how to do stuff like this. Put Hopkins in motion, have him played it in the slot, so to try to give him a better matchup and just kind of make things more difficult for the Saints, who are completely going all out to try and cover him. Well, now you're in a tough situation. Guess who's covering Hopkins on this play? It's Justin Evans again. It's their backup safety. What are we doing here, Saints? Don't have your backup safety covering Hopkins. But it's because he's in the slot and he's in motion, and that's kind of what the Saints are doing. But of course, you just have to say, listen, I don't care what's happening. If it's Hopkins, we pay him extra respect. Right when this play begins, what you're going to see is that as we get over here, it doesn't appear to be that open. You do see that Evans, once again, is making sure he does not get beat deep. That's his strategy. He also isn't looking towards Kyler Murray, though, because, again, has his back turned towards the sideline. So those are the two disadvantages for Evans, and that's where Hopkins can really come into play. Because, watch when Hopkins just cuts. He cuts so smoothly. It's like, what do you do about that? Like, him and Devontae Adams, those two guys, the way that they cut, it's otherworldly. There's no way to defend against that. What you have to do is just pay him as much attention as possible, and when you do that, then it opens up stuff for other receivers. So, I think he completely changes this Cardinals team. It sucks for the Cardinals that they did struggle so much without him. You were hoping that they could at least go 500 without him, but you have him now. So you are a better team now, and you won 8 straight games with him last season. Winning 8 straight is going to be tough. But while on paper, playing a team like the Vikings next week might seem like, oh, okay, well, they don't really have a chance there. If they're playing with Hopkins and I think that's a game that could go either way. I really do. The Vikings are winning a lot of games, maybe aren't looking as impressive. The Cardinals look like a completely different offense now. Their defense still has its issues, and that's maybe a video for another day. But you're at least in a position where your offense is, able to put up a ton of points against a team like the Saints. And yes, turnovers definitely helped them. Andy Dalton, had 3 interceptions in this one. So sure, that factors in. But as a whole, I just thought it was a really impressive day by the Cardinals. Very impressive day with Hopkins and all of that stuff. So, I think that Hopkins changes this team. I think this team can still be successful. That's what I think. Again, just in a little bit of a bind being 3-4 right now. But I think they're better than maybe their record would be given Hopkins is back. That's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.